While I was holding my 3-month-old baby, my wife's phone lit up on the kitchen table. Her boss had texted, "How's our son today?" I read it twice. Then I took a screenshot and sent it to his wife. 30 minutes later, my doorbell rang. That was the moment my life split in half. My name is Robert Whitaker, but most people call me Rob. I was 56 years old then, living in Plano, Texas, in a house I bought after 30 years of building Whitaker Freight Solutions. From 2 leased trucks and a folding desk in a warehouse office. I had money. I had a respected name in Dallas business circles. I had employees who called me sir, even when I told them not to. And I had a baby boy asleep in my arms, who I believed was mine. His name was Mason. He was small, warm, and breathing softly against my chest that Saturday morning. Kelsey, my wife, had gone upstairs to shower after telling me she barely slept. I believed her. New babies will humble anybody. The kitchen looked exactly like a home with a newborn does. Bottles drying near the sink. A half-empty mug of coffee gone cold. Diapers stacked beside a Target bag. Sunlight coming through the breakfast nook window. Then her phone buzzed. I wasn't snooping. That's what I told myself at first. It was right there on the table screen up beside the burp cloth. The preview appeared before I could look away. Grant Ellison, her boss. "How's our son today?" For a second, I honestly thought I'd misread it. Our son? I shifted Mason carefully in my arm and leaned closer. Then another text came in. "Still can't believe that old man thinks he's the father." My whole body went cold. Not angry at first. Cold. There's a kind of shock that doesn't explode. It empties you out. I stood there in my own kitchen, holding that baby, while the refrigerator hummed, and a sprinkler clicked outside in the yard. I looked down at Mason. He yawned, tiny mouth, tiny fingers curled into my shirt, and right then, I felt something worse than rage. Fear. Because I already loved him. I picked up Kelsey's phone with one hand. Her passcode was still her mother's birthday. She never changed anything unless it involved a handbag or a paint color. I opened the thread. There were photos. There were messages. There were jokes about me. Grant wrote 2 nights earlier. "Rob is too busy playing Grandpa Dad to notice anything." Kelsey had replied, "Be nice. He means well." Means well? Like I was some elderly neighbor bringing casseroles. I took screenshots. Every message I could. My hands shook, but I got them. Then I found Grant's wife in Kelsey's contacts, Diane Ellison. I attached the screenshots and typed only one sentence. "You deserve to know what your husband is saying about my child." I hit send. Then I set the phone back exactly where it was. Upstairs, the shower was still running. I sat down at the kitchen table with Mason against my shoulder and waited. I don't know what I expected. Maybe Diane would call. Maybe Kelsey would come downstairs and I'd lose control. Maybe Grant would panic. What I didn't expect was the doorbell. 30 minutes later, it rang twice. Hard. I carried Mason to the foyer and checked the Ring camera. Grant Ellison stood on my porch in a navy quarter zip and expensive jeans, jaw tight, face red. Behind him, a black Mercedes SUV idled at the curb. I opened the door. Grant looked past me, like he to see Kelsey. Instead, he saw me holding the baby. His expression flickered. "Where's Kelsey?" I looked at him for a long second. "Good morning to you, too." He stepped closer. "Did you send Diane screenshots?" "Yes." His face twisted. "You had no right." That was when anger finally showed up. Slow and clean. "No right," I said. "You texted my wife about my son from your phone in my house while I was holding him." Grant lowered his voice. "You don't know what you're doing." I almost laughed. This man had walked onto my porch after detonating my family and still thought he was in charge. Behind me, I heard Kelsey coming down the stairs. "Rob, who is it?" Then she saw Grant. She stopped on the bottom step wearing a robe, wet hair over one shoulder. Her face went white. Nobody moved. Mason started fussing softly in my arms. Grant looked at Kelsey and snapped, "You left your phone out. That told me everything. Not, 'Are you okay?' Not, 'I'm sorry.' Not even panic about the baby. Just blame. Kelsey whispered. Grant, why are you here? I turned slightly toward her. Because I sent his wife the messages. She covered her mouth. Grant pointed at me. You think you're clever. No, I said. I think I'm awake. He took one step into the doorway. I shifted Mason away from him. Don't come into my house. He smirked then, small and ugly. Come on, Rob. A man your age should have known better. That one hit deep. Not because he called me old. I knew my age every time my knees cracked getting off the floor after changing a diaper. It hit because he said it like I deserved this, like loving my wife, and trusting the child in my arms made me stupid. Kelsey started crying. Rob, please. Let me explain. I looked at her, and for 1 second, I saw the woman I married 4 years earlier at a charity golf tournament in Dallas. Beautiful smile, big laugh, ambitious in a way I mistook for drive instead of hunger. Then Mason cried louder. That brought me back. I looked at Grant. Leave. He didn't. So, I said it differently. Grant, there's a camera recording this porch. Leave before you give my attorney a better morning. His eyes moved to the Ring camera. That worked. Men like Grant are brave until documentation enters the room. He backed away, still glaring. This isn't over. No, I said. It's just finally honest. He got into the Mercedes and drove off too fast. Kelsey stood in the foyer crying quietly. I closed the door and locked it. For a few seconds, the house was silent, except for Mason's little hiccuping sobs. Kelsey reached toward him. Let me take him. I stepped back. Her hand froze in midair. That broke something in her face. Rob! I looked down at Mason again, then at her. Is he mine? She didn't answer. Not right away. And sometimes silence is more brutal than a confession. I nodded slowly. Okay. She started sobbing harder. I didn't know for sure. I felt the words go through me like a blade. Didn't know for sure. I handed Mason carefully into the bassinet by the living room couch, because my arms were shaking too badly to hold him safely. Then I walked into the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and called my attorney. Kelsey followed me. You're calling someone now. Yes. Rob, please don't do this while you're angry. I turned around. I'm not angry enough yet. My attorney, Ellen Markham, answered on the fourth ring. She'd handled business contracts for me for 15 years. Rob, everything okay? No, I said. I need a family lawyer, a DNA test, and someone who can preserve phone evidence legally. There was a pause. Then Ellen said, Are you safe? I looked at my wife crying beside the kitchen island, then at the baby sleeping in the bassinet. No, I said quietly. But not the way you mean. That afternoon, I drove to a LabCorp in Frisco, with Mason strapped into the back seat. Kelsey didn't come with me. She wanted to. She begged, actually. But I told her no. Not because I wanted to punish her in that moment, although maybe part of me did. I told her no, because I needed one quiet hour where nobody was crying, lying, explaining, or asking me to be reasonable. The waiting room smelled like hand sanitizer and burnt coffee. A little TV in the corner played some home renovation show with the volume too low to understand. A man in work boots filled out paperwork beside me. An older woman coughed into a tissue. Normal people doing normal Saturday errands. Meanwhile, I sat there holding a baby carrier, waiting to find out whether the child I'd been rocking at 3 o'clock in the morning was biologically mine. A nurse called my name, Robert Whitaker. I stood too fast and nearly kicked the carrier. Right here. She looked down at Mason and smiled. Well, aren't you handsome? I almost lost it right there. Because he was. He had round cheeks and dark blue eyes that seemed to study everything. He grabbed my finger while the nurse explained the cheek swab. Tiny grip, stronger than you'd expect. Just a few seconds, she said. Mason fussed when she swabbed his cheek, then settled as soon as I picked him up. That nearly destroyed me, too. He knew my arms. Whatever the test said, he knew my arms. Afterward, I sat in the Escalade in the parking lot for 20 minutes, with the engine running and the air conditioner blowing too cold. I called my oldest daughter, Lauren. Lauren was 32, lived in Fort Worth, and had inherited my stubbornness with interest. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Dad." I tried to speak normally. "Can you talk?" There was a pause. "What happened?" That's the thing about grown children. They hear it before you say it. I told her enough. Not everything. Not the ugliest messages. Just that Kelsey may have had an affair, Mason's paternity was uncertain, and I was getting legal help. Lauren didn't speak for a while. Then she said, "I'm coming over. Number? Dad." "No, honey, not today." Her voice sharpened. "She used you." I closed my eyes. "Maybe. Maybe, Dad. She had a baby and let you believe." "I know." My voice cracked on that last word, and Lauren stopped. I hated that she heard it. I'd spent her whole life being the steady one, the man who fixed tires, paid tuition, showed up early, handled funerals, stayed calm during emergencies. Now I was sitting outside a lab with a car seat behind me, feeling like I might come apart in a strip mall parking lot. Lauren softened. "Are you alone?" "Yes." "Don't be. I'm not ready for company." That's not the same thing. She was right. But I couldn't handle being righted by my own daughter just then. "I'll call you tonight," I said. "You better." When I got home, Kelsey was sitting at the kitchen table, exactly where everything had started. Her eyes were swollen. Her robe was gone. She'd changed into jeans and a white sweater, like clothes could restore order. "Where is he?" she asked. "Asleep." I carried Mason upstairs to the nursery, laid him in the crib, and stood there longer than necessary. The nursery was painted soft green. Kelsey had picked it after rejecting 6 shades from Sherwin-Williams. There was a white rocking chair in the corner, a framed print of a sailboat over the changing table, and a little wooden sign above the crib that said, Mason James Whitaker. I stared at that name until my eyes burned. Downstairs, Kelsey waited. When I returned, she said, "Grant shouldn't have come here." I looked at her. "That's your opening." She lowered her head. "I don't know what to say." "Try the truth." She folded her hands on the table. Her wedding ring caught the afternoon light. "It started last year." I sat across from her slowly. "Before or after you got pregnant?" She closed her eyes. "Before." I nodded once. "There are answers you expect, but still aren't ready to hear." "Where?" "Work trips, mostly." "Mostly?" She flinched. "I know how it sounds." "No, Kelsey, you know exactly how it is." She started crying again, but quieter this time. I was lonely. That word again. People use lonely like it's a hall pass. I leaned back in the chair. "You were lonely, in a 5-bedroom house, with a husband paying every bill, taking every night feeding he could, and telling everybody you were the best thing that ever happened to him. That's not fair." "No," I said. "Fair left this house sometime before Grant started texting about our son." She covered her face. I waited. Not because I was patient, because I was afraid if I kept talking, I'd say something I couldn't take back. After a minute, she whispered, "I didn't plan for this." "Mason?" She nodded. "And when you found out you were pregnant?" "I wanted him." That answer surprised me. Not enough to forgive her, but enough to hurt differently. "Did Grant know?" "Yes." "Did he ask you to tell me?" She looked away. There it was. "No," I said quietly. "He wanted me to raise him." She didn't deny it. I stood up and walked to the sink. Outside, the Texas sun was too bright, the yard too neat, the whole neighborhood too normal for what was happening inside my chest. Kelsey said behind me, "I thought maybe he was yours." I gripped the counter. "Don't." "I did, Robert. I really did." I turned around. "You let me cut the cord." Her face collapsed. "You let me stand in that hospital room, crying like an idiot, while another man knew there was a chance." "I'm sorry." Sorry is too small. That shut her down. For a while, we just sat in the wreckage. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Robert Whitaker?" "Yes. This is Diane Ellison, Grant's wife." Her voice was calm, too calm. "I received your message. I'm sorry you had to find out that way." "So am I." I heard a car turn signal clicking on her end. Then she said Grant came home furious. He says you invaded your wife's privacy and created a misunderstanding. I almost laughed. Diane, there are messages about my baby. I know. A pause. Then her voice changed. Mr. Whitaker, I'm outside your house. I walked to the front window. A silver Lexus sat at the curb. Kelsey saw me looking and stood up. What is it? I didn't answer her. Diane continued. I'm not here to make a scene, but I think we need to talk before our spouses coordinate a story. That sentence told me Diane was not naive. I opened the door. Diane Ellison stepped out of the Lexus wearing black slacks, a cream blouse and sunglasses that made her look like she dressed for court instead of heartbreak. She was probably 50, maybe 51. Elegant, controlled, the kind of woman who looked quiet until you realized she was listening to everything. She walked up the path and stopped at the porch. Is Kelsey here? Yes. Good. Kelsey appeared behind me in the doorway and went pale again. Diane removed her sunglasses. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Diane looked at Kelsey and said, How long? Kelsey's mouth opened but nothing came out. Diane nodded slightly. That long. She turned to me. May I come in? I stepped aside. We sat in the living room while Mason slept upstairs, and the house held its breath. Diane didn't cry, not once. She asked questions like an attorney taking deposition notes. Dates, trips, messages. Whether Grant had mentioned Mason, whether money had changed hands, whether company accounts were involved. That last one made me pause. Company accounts. Diane looked at me carefully. You own Whitaker Freight Solutions, correct? Yes, and Grant's company has used your logistics vendors. I frowned. Through standard contracts. Why? Diane glanced toward Kelsey. Kelsey looked down. My stomach tightened. Diane reached into her purse and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I found this last month and didn't understand it. Now I think I do. She handed it to me. It was an invoice from a consulting LLC I'd never heard of, paid by one of Grant's development entities. Recipient name, Kelsey Whitaker. Amount, $18,500. Description, Vendor Relationship Advisory. I looked at Kelsey. What is this? She whispered. Rob. Diane's voice stayed level. My husband isn't just careless with women, Mr. Whitaker. He's careless when he thinks people won't check paperwork. I stared at the invoice. Suddenly, the affair wasn't the only room on fire. I had spent 30 years building a company people trusted. My vendors, my contracts, my name, and now my wife and her boss might have dragged all of it into their mess. Kelsey reached toward me. Rob, I can explain. I stood up. Number? My voice was quiet, but it stopped everyone. No more explaining before lawyers. Diane nodded once like she approved. Then she said, Good, because Grant thinks men like you are too proud to ask for help. I looked at her. And what do you think? For the first time, Diane's expression softened. I think proud men can still learn fast when somebody tries to make fools of them. That was the first decent thing I'd heard all day. After Diane left, Kelsey tried to follow me upstairs. I stopped at the first step. You'll sleep in the guest room, she cried again. I didn't comfort her. That night, I sat in the nursery rocker, with Mason asleep against my chest, the little sound machine playing ocean waves beside the crib. I looked down at him and whispered, None of this is your fault. He stirred, then settled. And that was the worst part, because whatever truth came back from that lab, my heart had already made a decision my mind wasn't ready to handle. I loved him, and loving him might be the thing that hurt me most. The DNA results came back on a Tuesday morning. I was in my office at Whitaker Freight Solutions, sitting behind a desk that had seen every crisis a business can survive. Driver shortages, fuel spikes, insurance lawsuits, a warehouse fire in 2016 that nearly took us under. I'd handled all of that. But when the email from the testing company hit my inbox, I just stared at it. My office overlooked our main yard in Garland, east of Dallas. Through the window, I could see trucks backing into loading bays, diesel exhaust hanging low in the cool morning air. Men in reflective vests moved around with clipboards and radios. Normal workday. Inside my chest, nothing felt normal. I clicked the attachment. The words were plain, clinical, cold. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. I read it once, then again. Then I closed my laptop like the screen had burned me. Mason was not my biological son. I sat there for a long time, listening to the low rumble of trucks outside and the distant beep of forklifts moving pallets. I thought I would feel rage. Instead, I felt grief. That surprised me. Maybe it shouldn't have. Because the test didn't change the last 3 months. It didn't erase the nights I'd walked him around the kitchen at 2:15 a.m. while Kelsey slept upstairs. It didn't erase the way his tiny hand grabbed my finger. It didn't erase the first time he smiled at me like I was the whole world. Biology had answered one question. It had not solved my heart. My office door opened without a knock. Mike Dorsey stepped in, holding 2 coffees from Whataburger. Mike was 62, my operations manager, and the only man at the company who could tell me I was being stupid without getting fired. He'd been with me since we had 8 trucks, and one dispatcher named Rhonda, who smoked Virginia Slims behind the warehouse. He took one look at my face and shut the door. Results? I nodded. Mike set the coffee on my desk. Bad. Not mine. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down slowly. Damn, that was all he said at first. I appreciated that. Some men fill silence because they're uncomfortable. Mike respected it. After a minute he asked, "You okay? Number." "Good. I'd worry if you said yes." I almost smiled. Almost. I pushed the printed result across the desk. Mike didn't read it. He just looked at it like it was a snake. What now? I don't know. He leaned back, scratching his gray beard. You know, boss, I can handle angry. I can handle lawsuits. I can even handle your daughter yelling at me on the phone. Lauren called you. She threatened to come down here and personally remove Kelsey from your house. I rubbed my eyes. Sounds like her. But this baby part, Mike shook his head. That's different. I looked out the window. A driver named Pete was arguing with dispatch about a late route to Lubbock. Life kept demanding attention, even while mine fell apart. Then Mike said, "There's something else." I turned back. What? He slid a folder from under his arm. I wasn't going to bring this up until we knew about Mason, but after what Diane showed you, I started checking vendor activity. My stomach tightened. Mike? I know. He opened the folder. Inside were printed emails, invoices, route summaries, and vendor contracts. 3 months ago, Grant Allison's company started using our preferred freight vendors at discounted rates. That was approved through sales. No. I frowned. What do you mean, no? I mean somebody gave them access to our vendor pricing sheets and contact lists. I stared at him. Those pricing sheets were confidential, not top-secret government documents, but in logistics, relationships and rates are everything. You protect them because they took decades to build. Mike tapped one email. This came from Kelsey's personal Gmail to Grant's operations director. I read the subject line. Updated vendor contacts. My jaw clenched. Mike continued. And that consulting LLC Diane found it's received 6 payments, not 1. How much total? Little over $97,000. I stood up and walked to the window. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The affair was one thing. The baby was another. But this reached into my company, my employees, my name. I had men driving overnight routes in storms, women in dispatch juggling 20 crises before lunch, mechanics keeping trucks alive with half the parts they needed, people who depended on Whitaker Freight Solutions staying clean and steady. And Kelsey had treated that trust like something she could trade for attention. I turned around slowly. Who knows? You mean Diane, if she's got her own pieces, and whoever handled the invoices? Grant. Mike gave me a look. Boss. Right. Of course Grant knew. I sat back down. Mike said I've already locked access on shared vendor folders and pulled logs. Good. I also called Ellen. You called my attorney? Yep. Without asking me? Yep. I stared at him. He shrugged. Fire me after lunch. That time I did smile, but it didn't last. Ellen Markham arrived at the office just after noon with a family lawyer named Patricia Vance and a corporate compliance attorney named Howard Kim. Seeing all three of them walk through my warehouse office together made half the staff suddenly pretend to be busy. We met in the upstairs conference room that smelled like old coffee and dry erase markers. Ellen spoke first. "Rob, we need to separate the personal from the corporate immediately." "I'm trying." "No, legally." Howard Kim opened his laptop. "We preserve evidence. We restrict access. We document every instance of unauthorized data sharing. We do not threaten. We do not accuse publicly. We do not contact Grant directly, unless counsel approves," Patricia added, "and we handle the paternity issue through court, not emotion." I nodded, but my head felt heavy. Court, evidence, unauthorized data sharing. This was my life now. Not baby photos and bottle warmers. Legal categories. Ellen studied me. "You need to hear this clearly. If Grant used your company information for business advantage, this becomes much bigger than infidelity." Mike muttered from the end of the table, "Adultery with spreadsheets." Everyone looked at him. He held up both hands. "What?" "That's what it is." For the first time all day, I laughed. Not much, but enough that the room loosened. Ellen actually smiled. Crude, but not inaccurate. By 3 o'clock, we had a plan. Preserve everything. Pool access logs. Back up ring footage. Document Grant's visit. Secure Kelsey's devices through legal request. Prepare divorce filings. Prepare civil claims if misuse of company information was confirmed. No screaming. No revenge fantasy. Just paperwork sharp enough to cut bone. That evening, I went home later than usual. Kelsey was in the nursery when I arrived. She was rocking Mason in the chair, singing softly under her breath. The sight stopped me in the doorway. Because betrayal doesn't make every memory false. That's what people don't understand. She looked up when she saw me. Her face knew before I spoke. "The test came back," she whispered. I nodded. She closed her eyes. Mason slept against her shoulder. For a second, I hated Grant more than I hated her. Then I hated myself for still feeling anything. Kelsey said, "Rob, I'm sorry." I leaned against the doorframe. "He's not mine." She started crying silently. I expected anger to rise again. Instead, I felt tired. "You let me bond with him. I thought maybe—" "No." My voice stayed quiet. "You hoped." That landed. She looked down at Mason. "I didn't want to lose you." I stared at her. "So you gave me another man's child and hoped biology wouldn't notice." She flinched. "Good. Some sentences should hurt." Then I said, "There's more." Her eyes lifted. The invoices, vendor lists, emails to Grant's company. Her crying stopped. Fear replaced it. That told me everything. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's what I thought. Rob Grant said it wasn't a big deal." I laughed once. "Of course he did. He said your company had so much leverage anyway, and it would help him." "Stop." She stopped. I stepped into the room. "Listen to me carefully. You and Grant dragged my company into your affair. That company feeds over 200 families. I didn't think—" "No, you didn't." Mason stirred, and both of us lowered our voices automatically. Even in the wreckage, the baby commanded gentleness. That made it worse. I looked at Kelsey. "You need to leave the house tonight." Her face crumpled. "Rob, please. You can stay with your sister. Or a hotel. I don't care. What about Mason?" That question cut through me. I looked at him sleeping in her arms. The DNA results said one thing. My heart said another. "For tonight," I said slowly, "he stays here." Kelsey held him tighter. "He's my son, and legally for the moment, he's in my home under my care. Patricia will handle the rest tomorrow. You can't take him from me." "I'm not taking him. I'm protecting myself until lawyers sort this out." She stared at me like I'd become a stranger. Maybe I had. Or maybe I'd finally stopped being the useful old fool Grant thought he could step around. Kelsey packed a small bag at 9:30. She cried while folding clothes. I didn't help. Mike came by around 10 o'clock because Lauren called him again, and apparently assigned him emotional surveillance duty. He stood awkwardly in my kitchen eating leftover brisket from the fridge while Kelsey carried her bag downstairs. She paused near the door. "Rob," I looked at her. For one brief second, I wanted to ask why. Not the practical why, the real one. Why wasn't I enough? Why risk all this? Why let me love a child under false pretenses? But I didn't ask. Because people who betray you rarely give answers that heal anything. So I just said, "Your attorney can contact mine." She left. The house got quiet. Mike leaned against the counter. "You want me to stay?" "Number." "You sure?" "Number." He nodded. "I'll sleep in the guest room." I didn't argue. Around midnight after Mason's feeding, I sat in the dark living room while Mike snored down the hall like a chainsaw with asthma. My phone buzzed. Diane Ellison. I answered quietly. "Rob." "Diane." I found more. My eyes closed. "Of course you did. Grant is receiving the Dallas Business Leadership Award next month." "I know. He's giving a speech about family values." I almost laughed, but it came out bitter. Diane continued. "I think we should let him." That woke me up. "What are you saying?" Her voice stayed calm. "I'm saying, men like Grant build their armor in public. Maybe that's where it should crack." I looked toward the nursery hallway where Mason slept. For the first time all week, the anger inside me found a shape. Not violence, not chaos, a plan. "Diane," I said quietly, "send me everything." For the next 3 weeks, I played the part Grant expected from me. Old, wounded, embarrassed, too proud to admit how badly I'd been fooled. It wasn't hard. Most days I felt exactly like that. The trick was letting him believe that was all I was. I moved through Plano like a man carrying bad news in both hands. I went to work, came home, fed Mason, took calls from lawyers, signed documents, pretended sleep was still part of my life. Kelsey stayed with her sister in McKinney at first, then moved into a short-term rental near Legacy West. Her attorney contacted Patricia within 48 hours, which told me somebody had coached her quickly. Grant, no doubt. Men like him don't just cheat, they manage fallout. But Diane Ellison managed it better. She and I met twice that first week, both times at a quiet coffee shop in Addison, where nobody from our social circle would casually wander in wearing golf shoes and gossip cologne. The first time she arrived with a leather folder thick enough to ruin a marriage by weight alone. She sat across from me, ordered black coffee, and said, "I don't want revenge that gets us sued." I nodded. "Neither do I. I want clean consequences." That was when I knew Diane and I were going to get along. She'd been a corporate attorney before Grant convinced her to slow down and help manage their family foundation. That was how she described it. "Slow down," she said, stirring her coffee once. "That's what men say when they want a smart woman available, but not dangerous." I almost smiled. Sounds familiar. She opened the folder. Hotel receipts, credit card records, photos from a Scottsdale corporate retreat, emails. Grant forgot were synced to an old iPad Diane still had in a kitchen drawer. And then came the business records. Payments to Kelsey's LLC. Messages about Whitaker Freight Vendor access. Notes from Grant's operations director referring to Rob's preferred carrier list. That one made my blood pressure spike. Diane watched my face. "You didn't know. Number?" I didn't think so. There was no pity in her voice. I appreciated that. Pity feels like somebody patting dirt over your grave before you're dead. We agreed on 3 rules. Everything through lawyers. No public accusations without documentation. No using Mason as a weapon. That last one mattered most to me, because every time I looked at that little boy, my anger got complicated. Lauren didn't understand that at first. She came over one Thursday evening with groceries I didn't ask for and the expression of a woman ready to start a war. She found me in the kitchen warming a bottle while Mason fussed in the bouncer. "Dad," she said, setting bags on the counter. "Why is he still here?" I knew what she meant. Not cruelly. Practically, legally, emotionally, financially. Everything about Mason was tangled now. I tested the bottle on my wrist. Because he's a baby. Lauren crossed her arms. He's Grant's baby. He's Mason. She looked away, jaw tight. I walked over, picked him up and settled him against my shoulder. He quieted almost immediately. Lauren saw that. Her face softened despite herself. Dad, I know. She used you. Maybe. But he didn't. That stopped her. The kitchen went quiet except for Mason's little sucking noises on the bottle. Lauren sat at the island, suddenly looking younger than 32. I hate seeing you hurt. I hate being seen hurt. She gave me a sad smile. Yeah, that sounds like you. I looked down at Mason. His tiny hand opened and closed against my shirt. I don't know what happens long term, I admitted. Patricia says the court will consider everything. Biology, marriage, best interest, legal presumptions. It's messy. Lauren nodded slowly. But right now, I said, he needs someone calm. And you're calm. No, I said, I'm trained. That made her laugh once. Small, but real. The next morning, Howard Kim confirmed what Mike and I already suspected. Grant's company had used our confidential vendor information to undercut competitors on 3 residential development projects around North Texas. Not enough to bankrupt me, not even close, but enough to prove misuse. Worse, one of Grant's managers had emailed Kelsey. Rob won't care. He's too wrapped around the baby to notice. I stared at that line for a long time. There are insults you can shrug off. That wasn't one of them. Because it used my love for Mason as proof I was weak. I printed it and put it in the evidence folder myself. Not because Howard needed it. Because I wanted to remember exactly what kind of people I was dealing with whenever guilt tried to soften me. At work, I made quiet changes. Vendor portals were locked down. Pricing sheets were moved behind new permissions. All outside requests required written approval. Kelsey's access to anything company-related was revoked. Mike enjoyed that part a little too much. He walked into my office holding a clipboard and said, "Congratulations. Your wife no longer has better access than our senior dispatcher." Thank you, Mike. Should have done that years ago. Helpful. I aim for honest, not helpful. He was annoying. He was also right. I had blurred lines because I trusted my marriage. Kelsey handled social events, charity introductions, client dinners. She knew names. She heard conversations. She had access, because I never imagined she would use it against me. That was on me. Trust is good. Unrestricted access is not trust. It's laziness wearing a wedding ring. By the second week, Grant started testing me. First through mutual acquaintances. A Dallas contractor I'd known for 15 years called and said, "Rob, I hear there's some misunderstanding with Grant Ellison." I answered, "There is no misunderstanding." He cleared his throat. He says, "This could get ugly for everybody." Then he should stop making calls. The contractor didn't call again. Then Grant sent a message through his attorney, accusing me of harassment for contacting Diane. Diane laughed when she heard that. Actually laughed. We were on a conference call with Ellen and Howard. "Harassment," Diane said. "I'm his wife, unfortunately." Howard, who rarely joked, said, "That does create standing." Even Ellen chuckled. That small moment of humor helped more than I expected, because most of those weeks were ugly. Mason had reflux and screamed from midnight to 2 o'clock almost every night. I walked him around the living room, under dim lamps, exhausted and heartbroken, patting his back, while legal emails waited unread on my phone. Sometimes, I'd catch myself humming to him and suddenly remember the test result. Not mine. Then I'd hate myself for thinking that. Then I'd hold him closer. One night around 1:30, Kelsey called. I answered, because Mason had finally fallen asleep, and I didn't want the buzzing to wake him. "What?" Her voice was small. "Can I see him tomorrow? Talk to Patricia. Rob, please. I'm his mother." "I know. You're punishing me through him." That angered me. I stepped into the hallway and lowered my voice. "No. I'm keeping structure, because every time I trusted you with something precious, you handed it to Grant." She started crying. "I miss him. I believe you. Do you miss me?" That question landed strangely, not because I did, because I didn't know. I missed the version of my life where I didn't have to wonder whether every tender memory had a footnote. But Kelsey herself, the woman on the phone, I wasn't sure anymore. "I'm tired," I said. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." After we hung up, I stood in the dark hallway, listening to Mason breathe through the baby monitor. That was when I realized something important. Grant had taken plenty from me, but he wasn't going to take my judgment too. I would not become reckless just to prove I was strong. The Dallas Business Leadership Luncheon was scheduled for March 14th at the Adolphus Hotel downtown. Grant was receiving Family Values Business Leader of the Year, which would have been funny if it wasn't so insulting. Diane wanted him to accept the award first. Let him say the word, she told me during our final planning meeting. We sat in Ellen's office with Howard, Patricia, Mike, and Diane's divorce attorney, a sharp woman named Maribel Torres. Mike leaned back in his chair. "So, we're letting the fox give a speech about chicken safety." Maribel looked at him. "That is one way to describe it." Diane slid a printed program across the table. Grant's speech title was listed under his photo. Building with Integrity, Family, Faith, and Community. Mike read it and muttered, "I may throw up in my boots." The plan was simple, not theatrical. Legal. Diane would file her divorce petition that morning. Howard would deliver formal notices tied to the corporate misuse claims. Ellen would provide documented evidence to Grant's board and key investors through counsel. Patricia would handle the paternity and marital filings. I would attend the luncheon, not to scream, not to fight, to be seen standing upright while the truth entered the room. That mattered more than I expected, because humiliation makes you want to hide, and hiding lets people write your story for you. The night before the luncheon, I barely slept. Mason was at Kelsey's under a temporary visitation arrangement supervised by her sister. The house felt too quiet without him. I walked into the nursery around midnight. The crib was empty. The little sailboat print still hung above the changing table. The wooden sign still said, Mason James Whitaker. I stood there in the dark for a long time. Then my phone buzzed. Diane. One message. Tomorrow, we stay calm. I typed back. Tomorrow, we stay legal. She replied, and accurate. That made me smile. The next morning, I put on a navy suit, white shirt, and the silver cufflinks Lauren gave me for my 50th birthday. Before leaving, I looked at myself in the hall mirror. I looked older than I had a month earlier. No way around it, but not broken. That surprised me. At 10:40 a.m., I pulled up to the Adolphus Hotel in downtown Dallas. Valets moved quickly beneath the awning. Businessmen in suits checked phones. Women in expensive dresses stepped carefully out of SUVs. Everything looked normal. That was the strange part. The biggest moments of your life often happen while everyone else is deciding where to park. Inside the ballroom, round tables were covered in white linens. A stage stood at the front, with a blue and gold banner behind the podium. Dallas Business Leadership Council. I spotted Grant near the stage, shaking hands like a man already posing for the magazine photo. Then he saw me. His smile froze. For 1 second, just one, the confident mask slipped. I nodded politely. Then I took my seat at the back of the room beside Diane Ellison. She didn't look at me. She just said, "Ready?" I watched Grant turn back toward the crowd, pretending nothing had changed. "No," I said, "but I'm here." Grant Ellison walked onto that stage like he owned the air in the room. I'll give him that. Some men panic loudly. Grant didn't. He smiled, adjusted the microphone, and looked out over 250 people in the Adolphus Hotel ballroom like he hadn't spent the past month watching his life catch fire behind closed doors. The luncheon crowd was exactly what you'd expect in Dallas. Bankers, builders, city council people, contractors, charity board members, men in navy suits pretending they didn't compare watches, women who could destroy a reputation with one sentence over iced tea. I sat at the back table beside Diane. Mike sat on my other side, tugging at his tie like it had personally offended him. "I hate these things," he whispered. "You hate anything without barbecue." "Correct." Diane kept her eyes on Grant. Her face was calm, but her right hand rested flat on the table beside her water glass. I noticed her fingers were tense. I understood. Public strength takes effort. Grant began with charm. Thank you. Truly, this community has given my family more than I can ever repay. Diane made a small sound that might have been a laugh if it had any joy in it. Grant continued. My wife Diane has been the foundation of everything I've built. Mike leaned toward me. Should I start choking now or wait? I didn't answer. Because despite everything, hearing Grant say the word family still made my stomach twist. He spoke about integrity, about fatherhood, about legacy, about building homes where families could grow. Every sentence was polished. Every sentence was disgusting. Then he said, "A man's name is only worth what his family believes about him." That was when Diane stood. Not dramatically. She simply pushed her chair back and rose. The sound of chair legs against ballroom carpet wasn't loud, but somehow people noticed. Grant paused. Diane. She picked up a folder from the table and walked toward the stage. A murmur moved through the room. I stayed seated. That was the plan. Diane reached the front and turned to face the audience. Grant tried to smile. Honey, everything okay? Diane looked at him. Number. One word. Clean as a blade. The ballroom went quiet. Diane spoke into the microphone beside the podium before Grant could stop her. My husband was scheduled today to receive an award for family values and business integrity. Before that happens, I believe the council deserves accurate information. Grant reached for the microphone. Diane, this is not the place. She turned slightly. You made every place the place when you lied in all of them. A few people gasped. Mike whispered, Damn. Diane opened the folder. I filed for divorce this morning. Now the room fully shifted. Phones came out. Not openly at first. Low under tables. People pretending to check messages while recording history. Grant's face tightened. Diane, stop. She didn't. My attorneys have also provided documentation to the appropriate parties regarding undisclosed financial transfers, misuse of confidential vendor information, and personal conduct directly contradicting the values this award represents. Grant laughed once. Nervous. This is a private marital issue. That was my cue. I stood. Every eye near the back turned toward me first, then followed as I walked slowly down the aisle. My legs felt heavier than I expected. Not from fear exactly, from the weight of being seen. For weeks, shame had lived in private rooms, nurseries, attorney offices, empty kitchens. Now it walked with me under chandeliers. When I reached the front, Diane stepped slightly aside. Grant stared at me with pure hatred. You, he said. I took the microphone. I didn't look at him at first. I looked at the room. My name is Robert Whitaker. I own Whitaker Freight Solutions in Garland. Some of you know me. Some of you have done business with me. Some of you probably wish this program had ended before dessert. A few nervous laughs. Good. People listen better after they breathe. I continued. I'm not here to discuss every detail of my private life. I'm here because Mr. Ellison's conduct crossed into my company, my employees, and my professional reputation. Grant snapped. This is slander. Howard Kim stood near the sidewall. Come as a tax audit. No, Mr. Ellison. Howard said clearly. It's documented. That got another wave of murmurs. I held up a packet. Through counsel, evidence has been submitted showing unauthorized use of confidential vendor lists from my company, payments to a consulting LLC tied to my wife, and communications indicating Mr. Ellison's company benefited from access it should never have had. Grant stepped toward me. You bitter old man. There it was. The mask fell. The room heard it. All of it. I turned to him. Maybe, I said. But I'm the bitter old man whose evidence your lawyers are going to read all week. Silence. Then somewhere in the room somebody muttered, Good Lord. Mike later claimed it was him. I still think it was a woman from the bank table. Grant's face turned dark red. You think you can ruin me? I lowered the microphone slightly. No, Grant. You ruined yourself when you mistook trust for weakness. That line landed exactly where it needed to. Not theatrical. True. Diane then handed a second folder to the council president, a gray-haired woman named Margaret Lyle, who looked like she wanted to vanish into the floral centerpiece. Margaret opened it, scanned the first page, then looked at Grant. Her expression changed. That was the moment the award died. You could feel it. The sponsors knew, the bankers knew, the builders knew. Nobody had to it yet. Reputation can collapse before paperwork catches up. Grant tried one last time. This is personal revenge. Diane took the microphone back. No, she said. This is disclosure. That was colder than anything I could have said. Then Kelsey appeared near the side entrance. I hadn't seen her come in. She stood there in a cream dress, face pale, one hand pressed against her stomach like she might be sick. Our eyes met. For a second, I saw panic, then shame, then something like regret. I looked away first, not to punish her, because if I kept looking, I might forget why I was standing there. Margaret Lyle stepped to the microphone with visible discomfort. Given the seriousness of the information presented, the council will postpone today's award pending review. Postpone. That polite little word in Dallas business language, it meant dead. The ballroom erupted into whispers. Grant stood frozen near the podium, while people avoided his eyes. Two men from his investor table got up and left almost immediately. A contractor I recognized from Frisco shook his head and walked toward the exit. That hurt Grant more than shouting would have. Men like him survive on admiration. Watching it drain from the room was its own punishment. Diane walked off the stage first. I followed. As I passed Grant, he leaned close enough that only I could hear. "You'll pay for this." I stopped, turned, and said loud enough for nearby tables, "Send the invoice to my attorney." Mike burst out laughing behind me. He couldn't help it. A few others laughed too, which made Grant look even smaller. Outside the ballroom, Kelsey was waiting near the hallway by the restrooms. "Rob." I stopped, but kept some distance. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Did you have to do it like that?" I stared at her. "Like what? Publicly documented truthfully?" Her eyes filled. "I know I hurt you." "No," I said quietly. "You humiliated me, used my company, and let me love a child under a lie." "Hurt is too small," she flinched. "Good, not because I wanted cruelty, because accuracy matters," she whispered. "What happens to Mason?" That question cut through the whole building. For a moment, all the noise behind us faded. I thought about the crib, the bottles, his little hand wrapped around my finger. "I don't know. Yet," I said honestly. Kelsey started crying. "He needs stability." I nodded. "Yes, he does." She looked hopeful for half a second. Then I added, "That's why lawyers are involved." The hope faded. I walked away before the conversation could pull me into old habits. Outside the Adolphus downtown, Dallas traffic moved under a bright March sky. Horns, engines, valet whistles, the smell of exhaust, and hotel flowers. Diane stood near the curb, sunglasses back on. "You did well," she said. "So did you." Mike came out behind us, loosening his tie. "I need a cheeseburger and maybe a priest." Diane actually smiled. A real one. That was the first time I'd seen it. By 5 o'clock that evening, Grant's company had released a vague statement about personal matters and reviewing allegations. By 6, 2 investors had called Howard, asking where to send preservation acknowledgments. By 7 o'clock, the Dallas Business Journal had heard enough to start asking questions. I didn't give interviews. Neither did Diane. We didn't need to. The truth had already entered the room wearing a suit and carrying folders. That night, I went home alone. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Mason wasn't there. Kelsey had him for the evening under the temporary arrangement. I walked into the nursery anyway. Habit, I guess. The sound machine was off. The crib empty. A clean onesie lay folded on the changing table. I sat in the rocking chair and finally let my hands shake. People think public victory feels like joy. It doesn't always. Sometimes it feels like surviving a car crash and realizing the road ahead still exists. My phone buzzed. Lauren. I answered. Hey, sweetheart. Her voice was soft. Mike told me. Of course he did. He said you were amazing. He exaggerates. He said Grant looked like a boiled ham. That made me laugh. A real laugh this time. Then Lauren said, I'm proud of you. I looked around the nursery, throat tightening. Thank you. Are you okay? I took a long breath. No, I said. But I'm standing. And for that day, standing was enough. 6 months after the luncheon, I moved into a smaller house in Frisco. Not small, I wasn't pretending to be a monk, but smaller than the Plano place. Quieter, less polished. A 1-story brick home on a street with live oaks, dog walkers, and neighbors who waved without needing to know your net worth. I kept the company. That mattered. Whitaker Freight Solutions took a hit for a few weeks, because gossip moves faster than facts, especially in Dallas. But Howard handled the corporate side cleanly. Ellen kept our statements tight. Mike kept operations steady by yelling at everybody equally, which was his love language. Grant's world did not recover the same way. His investors pulled back first, then 2 development partners suspended contracts, then the Business Leadership Council removed his name from its website like he'd never existed. No dramatic perp walk, no movie ending, just calls not returned, lunches canceled, bankers suddenly unavailable. In business exile, often sounds like voicemail. Diane divorced him with the precision of a woman who had spent years pretending not to notice things while quietly saving receipts. She kept the house in Highland Park, half the foundation assets, and from what I heard, the dog. That last part made Mike happier than it should have. Good, he said one morning in my office. Dog probably had better judgment than Grant anyway. Kelsey and I finalized our divorce in August. Patricia handled most of it. I signed what needed signing. Kelsey cried during mediation. I didn't. Not because I felt nothing, because by then, crying around her felt like handing her something I couldn't afford to give away anymore. She lost the Plano house, not because I wanted her homeless, but because the house was mine before the marriage, and my attorneys were better prepared. She received a fair settlement, enough to live decently, not enough to keep pretending she'd married a lifestyle instead of a man. The hardest part was Mason. No surprise there. Biology said Grant was his father. The court said facts mattered. Kelsey said she wanted full custody. Grant, after everything, suddenly wanted visitation once his attorney realized abandoning the child made him look worse. That made me angrier than almost anything. Not because Grant wanted to see his son, because he wanted credit for wanting it. There's a difference. For a while, I stepped back under legal advice. I saw Mason through temporary arrangements, carefully documented, nothing emotional in writing. Every visit felt like both comfort and punishment. He was growing fast. Chunky legs, louder laugh, same serious eyes. One Saturday in September, Kelsey brought him to a supervised exchange at a family services office near Plano Parkway. The room had beige walls, plastic toys, and the saddest coffee machine in Texas. Mason saw me and reached out. Just reached. No politics, no DNA, no betrayal. Just a baby recognizing arms that had held him. I had to turn away for a second before picking him up. Kelsey saw it. For once, she didn't say anything. We spent 2 hours at a park nearby. A court-approved supervisor sat on a bench, pretending not to watch too closely, while I pushed Mason in a stroller under cottonwood trees. He fell asleep halfway through, one little sock missing. I kept that sock in my jacket pocket the rest of the day, like an idiot. Later, when I handed him back, Kelsey looked exhausted. She had changed, too. Less makeup, no designer sunglasses, hair pulled back. The shine was gone from her. And I don't say that with satisfaction. Consequences age people. She held Mason against her hip and said, "He knows you." I nodded. "I know." Her eyes filled. I didn't think that part through. That was probably the most honest sentence she ever said to me. I looked at Mason chewing on the edge of his blanket. "No," I said. "You didn't." She swallowed. "Rob, do you hate me?" I had been asked that question before in my life. By employees I fired. by my first wife during our rough years, by Lauren when she was 16 and I wouldn't let her drive to Austin with some boy who owned one clean shirt. But from Kelsey, it landed differently. I thought about lying. Saying yes would have been easy, clean, maybe satisfying, but it wasn't true. I don't hate you, I said. She started crying immediately. I continued, before she could turn that into forgiveness. But I don't trust you, and I don't want my life tied to yours anymore. She nodded, crying harder. That's fair. Fair. Another word that felt too small. Over the next few months, the legal arrangement settled into something unusual but workable. Grant was established as Mason's biological father and responsible for support. Kelsey had primary custody. I was not legally obligated to stay involved. Patricia told me that clearly. You can walk away, Rob. We were sitting in her office, afternoon sun cutting through the blinds. She said it gently, like she knew the sentence was heavier than it sounded. You have no duty here beyond what you choose. I looked at the paperwork on her desk. No duty. At 56, after a lifetime of obligations, that phrase should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt hollow. I thought about all the nights Mason slept against my chest while I walked circles through the kitchen. I thought about the hospital bracelet I still had in a drawer. I thought about how none of this was his fault. What if I choose limited involvement? I asked. Patricia leaned back. Then we define it carefully. Boundaries. No financial check. No informal promises. Everything documented. That sounded cold. It was also necessary. So, that's what we did. I set up a limited education trust for Mason. Not huge, not flashy. Enough to help him one day if the adults around him kept making a mess. I agreed to occasional visits, structured and clear, as long as it remained healthy. Lauren struggled with that decision at first. She came over for dinner one Sunday and found me assembling a high chair I'd bought for visits. She stood in the kitchen doorway, watching me fight with an Allen wrench. Dad. I know that tone. Do you? Yes. It means you think I'm being noble in a stupid way. She crossed her arms. Well, I tightened a bolt. I'm not doing it for Kelsey. I know. Not for Grant. I really know. I looked up. I'm doing it because one day that boy may ask who loved him before he knew anything about this mess. I don't want the answer to be nobody. Lauren's face changed. She looked away toward the window. Then she walked over, picked up the instruction sheet, and said, You put the back legs on wrong. That was her way of saying she understood. Thanksgiving came quietly that year. Not the big polished dinner I used to host in Plano, with catered sides and 20 people pretending not to discuss business at the table. This time, it was me, Lauren, her husband Chris, Mike, and his sister, who brought a pecan pie so sweet it should have required a warning label. Mason wasn't there. He was with Kelsey, and that was okay. I missed him, but I also noticed something strange. My house felt peaceful, not empty, peaceful. Mike carved the turkey badly. Lauren criticized him. Chris tried to fix the TV. Somebody spilled gravy on the rug. For the first time in a long time, nobody was performing. After dinner, I stepped outside onto the back patio with a cup of coffee. The air was cool. Somewhere down the street, kids were playing basketball in a driveway. A dog barked twice, then gave up. Mike came out and stood beside me. You doing all right? Yeah, he looked suspicious. Don't lie on a holiday, I smiled. I'm doing better. He nodded. That I believe. We stood there a while. Then he said, You know, Grant called me last week. I turned. What? Wanted to know if there was any chance you'd talk to him. I stared. And? I told him I'd rather get a colonoscopy at Jiffy Lube. I laughed so hard, coffee nearly came out of my nose. Mike looked proud. What? Too much? No, I said, wiping my eyes. Perfect. A week before Christmas, I received a handwritten letter from Grant. I recognized the return address and almost threw it away. Instead, I opened it at my kitchen table. It was 3 pages. Apologies, excuses, regret. A lot of sentences beginning with, I never meant. People say that when they don't want to fully face what they did. Near the end, he wrote, I convinced myself Rob was too old to really start over. I thought he needed the marriage more than the truth. I read that line twice. Then I folded the letter and set it down. That was the core of it. Not just the affair, not just the money, not even Mason. They had mistaken my loyalty for dependency, my calm for weakness, my age for surrender. That was their mistake. I didn't write Grant back. Some doors don't need to be slammed. They just need to stay closed. On Christmas Eve, Kelsey called. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I answered. Her voice was soft. Mason opened the little truck you sent. I had mailed him a wooden toy truck, painted red, close to the color of the first Freightliner I ever bought. Did he like it? He tried to eat the wheel. I smiled despite myself. That sounds positive. There was a pause. Then she said, Rob, I know I don't deserve your kindness. I didn't answer. She continued, but thank you for not disappearing from his life completely. I looked at the small Christmas tree in my living room. Lauren had decorated it because apparently my version looked like a hotel lobby with depression. He didn't do anything wrong, I said. I know. Another pause. Then she whispered, You were good to us. That sentence hurt more than I expected. Because it was true. And because being good hadn't protected me. I took a slow breath. Kelsey, I hope you become the kind of mother he deserves, she cried quietly. I'm trying. Then, keep trying. We hung up after that. No big forgiveness scene. No reunion. No warm music. Just two people standing on opposite sides of damage, trying not to make it worse. Later that night, I drove through Frisco looking at Christmas lights. Families stood in yards taking pictures. Kids ran around in pajamas. Inflatable Santas leaned sideways in the wind. I parked near a little pond in a neighborhood not far from my house and sat there with the window cracked. For the first time all year, I didn't feel like I was waiting for another blow. I felt tired, but clean. There's a difference. Revenge gave me back my name. The lawyers protected my company. The public truth stopped Grant from controlling the story. But none of that was the real victory. The real victory was that I didn't let their cruelty decide what kind of man I became afterward. I could have walked away from Mason completely, and nobody would have blamed me. Maybe some men would have. I didn't. Not because I was weak, because I was free to choose without being fooled. That's different. If someone in your life ever mistook your kindness for weakness, I hope you remember this: staying calm doesn't mean you're powerless. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is tell the truth, protect your peace, and refuse to become cruel just because someone else was. If this story meant something to you, share your thoughts below. And if you've been through betrayal, I hope you find your way back to yourself.